The day I proved I was serious about investing. How this works is basically I was 20 years old and I met a guy named Alex. He was retired and we both worked in the same place together. Alex only worked 2 days a week. He didn't have to work. He did it just to kind of add more money to his IRA account. And I watched this and I thought, wow, that's kind of cool that this guy goes fishing and he's got a little boat he takes out and he lives on the water and he's got a house that he's paid off and he's got everything he wants. And he goes to dinner wherever he wants with his family and his wife. And they just living the life. And he was only like in his mid 50s. So it was very impressive to me. So I asked him, how does he do it? And he says, well, I invest in some stocks too, and I do these things, but I, had businesses and I sold them and now I'm doing pretty good. So I said, well, I'm 20. How do I get started into this, right? How can I do this? Can I invest too? And I said, teach me, that's it. And he basically told me, I'm done wasting my time talking to people who don't follow through. I'm tired of wasting my breath, I think was almost his exact words. So that kind of sucked. How we met was we worked at this as tour guides at this place called the Columbus Fleet, and we basically taught school kids and the patrons about Columbus's voyage across the ocean in 1492, and explained how his log impacted the exploration process and so forth. And I was one of his understudies. So Alex was a very intelligent guy. And I'm going to go into his background first because he basically told me kick rocks, right? And I was interested in learning about him and learning if this was a guy to learn from. And sometimes you have to try to find those opportunities where you can get them, right? And don't give up. So I found out that Alex was, he graduated high school, he joined the Army, he became like Army intelligence. He was a very sharp guy. And a lot of the things he had learned was in the military or by reading his own books and just, he was a voracious reader. He wanted to learn. So he always read not fiction books, but nonfiction books, right? He wanted to learn about people and how they thought and everything else. And probably comes from having the intelligence background as well, so he could learn more. So when he got out of the military, he actually joined the police department in San Antonio, Texas in the 60s. It was kind of a tough time in the police at the time, because of the civil rights and everything else. So it was a little different for him. But he basically did pretty well in the police force. And then when he retired or left that, he opened his own supermarket of sorts. This is before convenience stores were really a big thing. So it was like some kind of a supermarket in San Antonio. And he did that for about 10 years. And then he sold it all off. He sold the building and he sold everything and retired and moved down to Corpus Christi, Texas, and decided to go fishing and enjoy the water, right? So that's kind of his background. And he started dabbling in stocks and doing all those things as well. And that's where he made a pretty good investment money. So he took his money and he made more money with it. This intrigued me, right? I mean, I'm 20 years old thinking, how do I make it? How do I do it as well? And I think a lot of young people today are in that same boat. This was the late 90s when I think in 95, 96, into the late 90s when I was talking to Alex about this. So the internet wasn't as prevalent as it is today. It was just getting kicked off, and they were basically using AOL Instant Messenger, and a few other things of that nature. It was very limited. But I could look up stocks and things using Yahoo, right? So Yahoo was around, and Yahoo had a finance thing and so forth. And so I would go to, since I was going to college at the time, I would go to the library and I'd log in on their internet because it was all dial-up. There was no high speed, right, at that time. And I would do my research there and I would bring him the papers because usually we used to look up stocks and so forth on newspapers. And that was how you'd figure it out. You also have to call up the broker and physically tell them what stock you wanted to buy, and it would cost you like $25 every time you did this. So it was kind of, it was not for everybody, right? It was for people that had some money. So that's the background of what this was all about. Going back now to when Alex told me basically kick rocks, I said, can you just give me just this little bit of insight? What do I need to do to get started? Just the basics. And he looked kind of frustrated, or not frustrated, more like annoyed, right? He had spent a lot of time talking to other people at this job, and they didn't do anything about it. So he was felt very unheard and underappreciated and almost disrespected, because he was giving his advice and they asked him for this advice and they did nothing about it. So he was kind of pissed off about it. So when you have this 20-year-old punk asking you questions, you're like, oh, come on, this guy's not going to do anything, right? So I just said, hey, what do you use? What do you do? How do you get started? He says, well, you need a brokerage account and you need to have at least $5,000 and fund that account, and then you can get started. I said, okay, so what do you suggest for a brokerage account, right? And Alex sits there and says, I use Quicken Riley, which at the time, I didn't know what brokerage account even was, right? I knew a bank account. I didn't know what a brokerage account was. So I said, okay, Quicken Riley. I wrote that down. And then I went, he was off. He only worked 2 days, so he was off the rest of the week. So while I went between school, classes, and everything else, I found the number for Quicken Riley, called him up, asked him how to start up a brokerage account. They explained it all to me, and they said funding is a minimum of $2,500, and I just gotten money from my student loan. So they funded my account. I think I had $7,000 or something. So I funded my Quicken Riley with $5,000, and with my job and stuff, I would pay myself back. This student loan money was for books and other things of that nature, right? All school related stuff. So I was going to just work and pay myself back. So that's how I did it. So the next week, I spent doing this and getting it all set up and ready. The next week when I saw Alex at work, I asked him, hey, if I have an account set up and I have money, are you willing to show me the ropes? Show me what you suggest? And he's like, yeah, almost annoyed, like, yeah, whatever, kid, right? So I said, well, I've already got an account and I've got $5,000 in it. And he just kind of perked up and kind of opened his eyes and was kind of perplexed and looked at me, and he pulled me to the side and he goes, seriously, you did that? I said, yeah. And I explained to him what I did and everything else. And he was impressed. You could see it in his face. He was like, okay, let's get started. And he started explaining what investments he chooses and how he chooses them and why he chooses them. So he's explaining all the foundation of it all, which opened up my eyes to how this all works. While a lot of people are emotional about it and buy things that they think they want, like Apple or Dell computers or Microsoft or whatever, he was more into a fundamental situation where he's like, what do people need? What are they always going to need? Power companies, we're electrical. You're going to have utility companies. You're going to have food companies, right? ConAgra, Philip Morris, all these companies that provide stuff that people need, not just want. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So he's like, yeah, this is all very recession-proof, inflation-proof, because it's all necessities. That made a lot of sense to me. I never thought of it that way, right? Because this is the late 90s and everybody was living pretty good. The economy was doing pretty well, and we didn't have a big national debt. And of course, I'm 20. I don't really know what the heck all this means anyway. So I just soaked up the knowledge he was explaining. And I kind of copied his portfolio for a bit. So whatever he would buy, I'd kind of buy a little bit and here and there. And he did sometimes speculate a little bit on things. When he had a few bucks extra, he's like, oh, maybe we'll speculate on this. Let's try this. Let's try that. So it became a game we played together, and the mentorship grew, and it was very it turned into a friendship. So Alex was one of these people that I kept everything close to the chest, right? Or kept it a vest, I guess they call it. And that was an interesting way to look at it too. He didn't like people to know too much personal stuff. So when he was sharing these things with me, I took it very, very serious, and I realized that this was a very unique environment, a unique friendship. And so I basically just wanted to honor him and do the right thing and learn and do him proud, right? Make him proud. This went on for, I think, a couple of years. We traded back and forth. But what I would do for him as well, instead of the paper where he would look up all the stocks, because that's all they had was a newspaper, I showed him some of the stuff we could do online, and he was pretty impressed with that. So I'd go to school and I'd log on and I'd say, hey, what stocks do you want to check out? And he's like, hey, check these, this, and this. And I'd bring back printouts of everything, all the priced earnings and everything that was involved in this. And Yahoo had all that stuff written out. And I bring those tickers back and give them to him, and he would like, wow, that's pretty cool. So we built a quicker portfolio that way, even though we had to call the brokerage, do it by mouth to mouth, call them and have them place orders, $25 a piece, and all these things. But that's how it worked back then. There was no way to do it with E-Trade or TD Ameritrade or Fidelity or any of these things. You couldn't just log on and buy stock. You had to go through the broker, and the broker had to make sure you wanted to do this, and they weren't giving you any information. You could ask them questions and say, hey, look, can you check this stock? Tell me what you think. What's the fundamentals on it, and so forth. And they would give you information, but they made it clear that they were not biased either way, right? It was supposed to be a completely, they were not trying to convince you to buy anything, not through those brokerage accounts, right? They weren't managing your money, basically. You were doing it. You were making those decisions. So it was an interesting learning path for sure. And of course, the longer I did it, the more I realized this was a beginning, and it could make me, it could carve me a path to financial long-term, either wealth or retirement or whatnot, right? So I wanted to make sure that I learned as much as I could from people like Alex. And so, yeah, that was a very pivotal moment in my life. And I made sure to tell him how much I appreciated that. Your mentors are invaluable to you. And if you have somebody that's willing to do this and go other way, especially an older person that's willing to share their knowledge with you, you should let them know. If people are willing to help you, when you show you're willing to do the work first, right? So you have to kind of, make the moves, right? You can't expect somebody to give you things. You have to sit there and prove to them that you're willing to do what it takes to learn. They are a fountain of knowledge, right? And if you find people like that, they're very important to keep close to you and to make sure you appreciate their willingness to help you and to grow from that. Looking back on it, Alex didn't really test my intelligence. He tested my commitment, right? He probably seen hundreds of people ask for advice over the years, and almost none of them took that first step. The brokerage account wasn't the lesson. The lesson was, if you won't do the first small thing, why would someone invest their time teaching you the big things?